You're very welcome to another episode of the Scaling Your Business podcast. For this episode, I am joined by Niall Phelan, the founder of the Naked Collective. Niall, you're very welcome to the show.
Hey Rian, how are you doing? And there goes the dog in the background. Just
All good.
Perfect time.
Part of the 21st century. Niall, as I mentioned, founder of the Naked Collective. Niall, if you see me looking to my right, I'm at home, so I'm looking at my notes here. LinkedIn recently listed your company as one of the top 10 startups of 2021 in Ireland. So congrats to that. But that's not where we're going to start. We're going to start back at the very beginning, the early days, Selbridge, if I'm correct. Is that where you grew up?
Originally Tala, actually. So I grew up in Tala until I was finished primary school, and then we moved out to Selbridge, and I went to secondary school in Selbridge, and then lived there until I was finished secondary school, and then pretty much have been all over the place.
What were your early days between Tala and Selbridge like? Any standout favorite memories? Any hobbies?
I'm soccer mad, so I grew up soccer mad, and focused on that a lot. But I wouldn't be Selbridge is grand and all, but moving from primary to secondary school, we don't know anyone is challenging at the best of times, especially when they're not too fond of lads coming in from Tala. So it was interesting.
Absolutely. Well, look, we'll ask one more question in this section, and we'll move on. And it's around impact and influence. People can usually pick a number of small group of people that had a massive impact on their early days that helped them become the person they are. An acquaintance, a school teacher, a parent, a friend. Anyone spring to mind for you?
No, look, I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family, and my dad back in the day went out on his own in business in the 80s when the economy was really struggling, and we worked in that business growing up. So if you wanted pocket money, you went into the kitchen and you either peeled a £10 bag of carrots, probably about 20 £10 bags of carrots, or a load of bags of prawns got shelled, or whatever else was required to be done. So that was my days. There was plenty of days missed school as well in working in the kitchen. And I got really lucky actually, because he was, you would have, back in the day, he was quite entrepreneurial, you'd call it, back in the day. Maybe stalking is a better word now. He sort of stalked the FAI, and he was running Finstown House, and he got the Irish team to come stay with when Jack Charlton was sort of leading up to the Euros in '88 and Italia '90 and '94. So I spent weeks in and amongst the team and Jack and Morris Setters and all these really iconic people. Had sit downs as a kid. I mean, I was very young, but you're sitting there with Paul McGrath and Niall Quinn and Tony Cascarino and Frank Stapleton, and Frank's had a few beers on him, and Paul's always got a few beers on him, and you're listening to them, ripping the shit out of each other, and just learning from the guys and their focus, different people's focus in that team on how they went about their business. Got to ride to the game on a few buses. Ireland versus Portugal was a friendly, and my highlight, I think we beat them 3-1, and I got down to the dugout and everything with Jack. So it was that was pretty standout. But being around, I wouldn't say Jack spent any time with me, because he had plenty of other stuff in his mind rather than the little fella following around like a gobshite. But just listening to him and how he dealt with stuff, I only recently reflected how much of an impact I think that had on me, and how I approach things.
An incredible story that is. I'm a big fan of the Irish team. I travel abroad to most games. Strangely enough, I actually have like one of the things about like the Ireland game here next to my table. I'm still just imagining all the stories from that. But look, let's move on in terms of business. I'd like to rewind the clock to focus on one of your previous roles. In 2008, you spent 5 years at Molson Coors, finishing up there as the Director of Emerging Markets and Craft Beer. So my question is, and this is before we get into your current business and other previous roles in entrepreneurship you've had, is from your time at Molson Coors, did you take any lessons from your time, improving any skills, such as building rapport, the ability to spot trending moments? Yeah, I'll guess I'll leave it as open as that.
Um, not particularly from course. I think I learned, a lot of my learning in malt and coors came around, how breweries operate, how good beer is made, how bad beer is made, and how to really work across factories and interact with those teams in a different way. Because I come from a sales and marketing background, so I'd say that was probably one of the bigger learnings. I sat on the exec or the board or whatever for the UK and Ireland. I wouldn't say I particularly enjoyed that. I'm not a boardroom sort of person. I'd say my biggest learnings in my career go back a bit earlier than that. I spent nearly 5 years in Nestle. Had a very interesting time, and I'm still very close to a lot of people that I used to work with. And I think there's moments in your career, maybe one or two, when you look around the team and the people sitting around the table, and then the next couple of layers down, and you go, holy crap, this is like once in a lifetime in terms of talent and people, and just soak up as much as you can. And I got very lucky in that period in Nestle, just with the quality of people, and in particularly my boss, the guy who hired me into Nestle, I'm still very close friends with. So that would have been amazing. I think, a great time. And it's only, again, in hindsight, you look back and go, Jesus, all the lessons I learned there, you'd pay hundreds of thousands in an MBA for that. And again, I was a member of the board for UK and Ireland there. For the pet care division, which was a great experience because I had no clue what I was doing. But it's very quick when you get in, you realize not many people do around the table. They're all winging it. It was a great experience. I think in Coors, I met some great people. I enjoyed it, but I think Coors was very much in a transitionary period when I was there. What I did enjoy was setting up the Ireland business and then running Sharps and some of that stuff and getting involved in the global craft beer strategic work. But I think I'm just not suited to a big company boardroom or getting close to that boardroom and the politics, and because I'm too blunt. And it doesn't work. I've had plenty of moments where I'll deliver something and there's tumbleweeds and just deathly silence.
The real reason I asked you that question was I wanted to pick a corporate role that you had a decent amount of time at. I probably didn't scroll back far enough for Nestle. And it was a two-part question. I wanted to ask the corporate question first, and then more of an entrepreneurial founder-led question second. And I'm not going to go into too much of like the after of the Rye River Brewing Company. But I'm curious. There was over 3 years there. Was there a standout lesson you took from that venture that you carried with you or was in the back of your mind when you opened up what is now the Naked Collective?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to preempt maybe what you were leaning into, like, I do look for people who've gone and worked for those big FMCG businesses and then have had some entrepreneurial experience, because you got to get your foundations and you're going to learn them. And I encourage people who've worked for just small businesses to go do that. But I think there's a couple of big learnings, where Rye River for me, and the one main one is, the people you surround yourself with are actually the most important thing, and that was a big learning going into the Naked Collective. So if you put people around you that are the same as you, you're effectively heading for disaster. You got to put people around you who complement and balance and find those skill sets that you don't like doing. And I would say that wasn't necessarily the case in Rye River. And I think secondly, I vowed never to invest in stainless steel again. So God help anyone who wants to build a brewery. That's just not my idea of a fun way to spend money. So I think the challenge being every time you raise cash, you're funding stainless steel, and you get one part right, then you got to put a new packaging line in. You get that right, then you realize you can't fill the bloody thing quick enough. So there was a lot of learnings. I think the biggest learning for me out of it though is I pretty much wasn't drinking. For most of that period, and I was training pretty hard, and so I just fell out of love with the industry, because it's like I'm actually selling something I don't necessarily believe in anymore. And it was great beer and everything, but it's a bit, feels a bit hypocritical of me to be selling stuff to people that I don't necessarily drink all the time or consume all the time.
Yeah.
And so when I sort of said, look, it's time for me to leave, that was a big part of it. And then I had this sort of moment over the next year or so where I went, Jesus, I've spent most of my life selling things that actually kill people just really, really slowly, like beer or Red Bull or whatever it is. And I was like, wouldn't it be great to actually create products that do good on the inside, but also at the same time focus on that piece around planet purpose. And that was the sort of big moment. I was running my consultancy and doing really well, actually, and enjoying that, but going, I need something more here. Earning money is just part of it. Like, how do you do something a bit bigger? Yeah.
Makes sense. That actually answers one of the later questions I had around the Naked Collective. I think it was your partner, Kat, who had said a quote where we focus all our money on R&D, bringing products to market. We don't invest in stainless steel. We don't have factories. We outsource that. So that answers that. But before we get into Naked Collective, rather than me give kind of like the elevator pitch or the 30-second commercial, you'll do a much better job because it's your baby. So why don't you take the mic?
Yeah, look, it's really simple. Where our aim is to be the most transparent drinks company in the world. I think everybody that works for us just got fed up with the jazz hands of the food and drink industry, splashing natural and good for you or low sugar or this and that on different products. And then you turn around the can or the bottle and it looks like the back label of a bottle of Head and Shoulders. And like, I don't want my kids putting that stuff in their body. And so that was the sort of the starting point for Naked Collective. And what we really tried to do then was just create products that genuinely work. So don't put chamomile on there unless you put enough fucking chamomile in there to actually do something, right? Don't create a non-alcoholic beer unless you believe it's one of the best in its category and tastes as good as the regular one. And that's the mission we've let out for. Not that we always get it right, but that's always what we're leading out for. How do we take ingredients out of this? How do we make it simpler? How do we make the best tasting product we can? How do we create new categories? And so when you look at our sustainability mission, there's a whole piece around planet and community, but there's actually a whole piece about making change from the inside out. And if you can do that, then people start to focus naturally on planet and community around them if they're making changes internally as well. So that was that's the mission, like make products that fit modern lifestyle from the moment you wake up till the moment you go to bed, and you don't mind if your kids have some too and you'd nearly go have a second one rather than wincing every time they pick up a can of Monster or a Red Bull or a Coke or something.
I like it. One of the things I was most interested about was your go-to-market approach, because I know you only launched at the end of 2019. I think it was December 2019, according to your LinkedIn. And if we fast forward today, you've closed a deal with Wizz Air. You've collaborated with the likes of Rita Ora. You've been included in the goodie bags at the Academy Awards. You've been named official partner of 2 of Italy's biggest sporting events. So from launch to today, you've done amazing things. But when you were sitting down in those kind of like Q4 of 2019, what was your strategy then before launch of how are we going to get the product out there into as many people's hands? Was there like an ICP? Was it just get it out to as many people as possible? Because if you fast forward, 24 months, you've done some incredible things.
Yeah, when you say it like that, I mean, we're not happy. So it's like we're not happy with where we're at. I think you got to remember December 2019. There was a mention of some little virus popping up in China. We only launched our product to market in the end of September 2020. Was our first retail store. It was Spar Ireland, who'd been an incredible supporter of ours all the way through. And I think our mission, if I went back to December 19, when me and Kat were sitting down, was put as many cans in as many hands as possible. Tell our story. Do on-premise really well, cafes, delis, bars, restaurants, hotels, and then build retail. Then in March 2020, we were sitting in New York, closing out an investment deal, and and there's a sort of announcement over the course of a couple of days where I think the Taoiseach come out on the steps and say, "Hey, we're shutting down Ireland," and and then Trump announced a travel ban. So I think we were in New York when the travel ban was announced, and we were flying back the next day or so. But we were due back in New York next week and couldn't travel, and that was to close our deal, which then fell apart. And then Youth Ireland shut down. So we were trying to start up the business from home, no culture, no opportunity to bring people together and do all the stuff you do in a startup. So by the time we got to September, our entire strategy had changed. We had to pivot everything. So we led with retail first, not on premise. We weren't able to put cans in hands because, Jesus, if you walked up to someone and handed them a can of Coke, kind of anything, they'd think you were trying to poison them with, some form of the pandemic, and potentially get arrested. And so, we did everything we could within those sort of guidelines at the start, but we grew internationally despite that. I think, we've had a lot of hard lessons during the pandemic, which is people aren't stopping in stores and spending time looking at new products. But our mission was to be much further along than we are now. I mean, we've raised a lot of money and we're growing really, really fast. But 2021 is going to be a fraction of what we thought it would be. However, 2022 looks like it's going to be pretty spectacular already. So yeah, I think our strategy has always been really aggressive, sort of roll out in a few focused key markets.
Smart. You mentioned 2022, and that's kind of the second part of the question is what's next? I could mention all the stores you're in, all the places you sell online, the deal with Wizz Air I mentioned. Your business partner, Kat, said she had hoped sales to airline passengers would reach a healthy six-figure number of individual cans every year. That's in an article referencing your deal with Wizz Air. So where do you see growth? And I know you've relocated to the US now, so that's probably a hint of what your answer is. But where do you see growth over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think, look, Wizz Air is a great one, actually. I was only talking about it this morning. Their orders in September just doubled what they bought in August, which was about 3 times what we expected them to buy in the first place. So they're miles ahead of anything we thought that they would do. And the pickup on the brand and that environment seems to be spectacular. So, it's a really interesting firm because we just did it, because there was an interesting conversation and it was never part of our strategy. We're growing into food service now. We're pushing pretty hard back to our original strategy, go places where people have a bit longer dwell time, because we need to have a conversation with people. You can't have a conversation with people if they're panicking in and out of the supermarket. But when they're sitting down and they're having their lunch or they're having a bite to eat or they're in a bar, that's good places we can have conversations with them. And there's different ways to have those conversations. So we're really pushing hard and heavy into food service in Ireland and now in the UK. We're trying to get back on track in the UK because the combined Brexit COVID thing has meant supermarkets being bought by different people has just sort of meant it's been almost impossible to put new products on the shelf in the UK in the last 2 years. So that's now seems to be opening up and resetting. But yeah, look, North America is huge for us. So Ireland was always going to be our headquarters, but a small part of the overall business plan. We're in about 1,000 stores in Canada. We're planning on doubling that by January. We're pretty much on track to do that, maybe even increasing by 150% if everything goes well, touching wood. And then in the US, we're exploding. So we're trying to keep control of that. We actually can't produce enough stock at the moment to keep up with demand in the US. So we just agreed to launch in Michigan. So we signed some agreements there, and we're working on agreements in Illinois, in the Pacific Northwest. We're already in 400 stores in New York, and we're trying to do some additional agreements in the Northeast. Working on an agreement in Florida. We've got Rayleigh's, a retailer out in the West Coast, who just launched So Beer for us. We've got a number of other retailers that have just gone live, or about to go live. So between now and the end of the spring, we're expecting all our Q4 revenue in the US to sort of quadruple in Q1. and then sort of grow from there. So it's sort of taking it one quarter at a time. But look, the US and Canada are a huge part of our plans, but Europe is really important. The UK is a really important market for us. Italy, Austria, Netherlands, sort of key focus markets. So we're trying not to go too far, too quickly. But they're the markets that we tend to focus on.
Nice, very cool. All that without investing in any stainless steel either is an added bonus.
Yeah. It's a great way to do it most of the time.
No, I've only got 3 questions left here. The first one is, what's your personal definition of success?
Look, I don't have one. I'm terrible at even celebrating success. I've already moved on probably to the next 5 things by the time we achieve something. But for me, I tell people, like, I sort of look myself in the mirror most days and go, did you do something new today? Did you challenge yourself? Did you learn something? Did you give it 100%? And the answer is, if you look in the mirror and tell yourself the answer is yes to all of those questions, you're a liar. And the worst thing you can do is lie to yourself, because you just don't have days like that. They're 1 in a million. And there's days when you don't give it, or you go, do you know what? I actually didn't give the team enough airtime on that call. So for me, it's just that constant desire to just be better, to listen, to learn, to grow, and to put just amazing people around you who are going to make you look a bit stupid because they're so good. Because that's the way to do it. Like, if you can get people around you that are outstanding, success happens from good people. So I know that's a long answer, but I don't have hey, I want this or I want that. That's just not in my mission statement. Like,
can you think of anything that when you started out in your career, back Nestle days, you could even go further back than that you weren't great at, but you knew was critical to improve on? You might not have known then, but looking back, you knew it was critical to improve on if you were to thrive in industry or role that you're now in. And if so, what is it?
I'd say, couple of things. I just had a moment actually. I just remembered that I used to sit down scribbling in school, different versions of what my company logo would be at around the age of 8 or 10. I was only telling my wife recently, I'd completely forgotten about it, and it came back to me about a month ago. Because I always tell people, you don't set up the plan to be in the consumer goods industry. You want to be a fireman. And I started out doing aerospace engineering, so we had a completely different tack. Now I can't remember your question, Rian. Sorry.
When one skill when you started out in your career.
Oh yeah. So I don't know if they're skills, but definitely behavior. So I'm the most impatient person you're ever going to meet in your life. I'm terrible. So learning patience has been difficult. I remember in Nestle, my gaffer sort of saying to me, listen, it doesn't matter where you are. If you've left everyone 3 miles back behind you, you're not going to get anything done. So you got to bring them along a bit faster, but recognize that you're moving at a pace that not many people are. And then I, very early on in my career, had just a terrible temper. I mean, terrible. Just got frustrated so easy. And learning to sort of balance that out, manage it, and not, I'd say I could count on one hand how many times I've really lost my temper in the last decade. But it's not, my instinct is I got to nearly count when I'm in a situation and I'm going, how the hell did that happen, or why did you make those decisions? And so I think it's just spending that bit of time to listen and understand. So that combination of patience and just learning to be really balanced with people. And what that brings then is a bit of support from the team. So they were important. My financial skill set as well has been, I think, important during that period. I've really focused in on understanding, accountancy and financial planning for a business and how to understand it. And a lot of learnings in that from Rye River, actually unintended learnings, but, good learnings around cash and, profit and all that sort of stuff, and how to, how actually the only thing you should be focused on your first 3 years is your cash flow, to be honest. So it's been an interesting journey, and still learning stuff every day. I'm sure my team would still say I'm the most impatient pecker in the world.
Final question for you, Niall, is around the secondary school curriculum. If you we're given the decision-making power to add a mandatory subject that's not on the curriculum, what would it be and why?
Now, I'm going to do politician. I'm not actually going to answer the question you asked me because I have an interesting perspective. My kids have just moved there, a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. And we've just relocated. They've been in school, obviously, in Ireland their entire life. So, we've come to Florida to run the business, and one of the big challenges for us is the education system not as good, because you hear all sorts of stories, not just about the US, but in particular there'd be a view in the rest of the US maybe that the Florida education system is not fantastic, and actually I would say that it's infinitely better than anything I've seen in secondary school in Ireland. So I think my biggest change in secondary school in Ireland is, don't build up to one exam and then ask people to bet their education and their life on one exam, because, I've seen so many people hit that leaving cert, do really, really well throughout secondary school, and then absolutely crash and burn because they're not exam people, right? I'm not an exam person. I hate them. And what I see here is, I have an online portal for my kids. Their teachers upload their grades every day, graded homework, graded quizzes in class, graded exams on a weekly basis. Their grade point average is there. I can see everything live. They know it. They're in it every day. They're going, this is my grade point average. This is what my score is. I need to get that up. I need to resubmit that. I need to do that. So absolute focus on constant improvement and holding the bar you set for yourself during the year. One of the things they're graded on is employability, right? So if you turn up late for class, or you don't ask good questions, or you don't take initiative, your employability score comes down in the school, and it's part of your grade system. So how amazing would that be in secondary school to have an employability score? And that constant, what I see is kids that hated going into school, now just love school. It's just part of that's their goal and part of their sort of daily focus, and working harder to achieve that. So I'd say that's been transformation. It's early days. Listen, 6 months in, they'll have forgotten about Ireland and they'll hate school again. All right. So, but right now, I think, employability, working on what makes it, what makes a good candidate for employment. What does that mean? What does hard work mean when we talk about it? And bringing those sort of practical things into school, and giving people a really good sense of, it's not all about university, because there's other paths here you can take. It doesn't all end at the end of the leaving cert. There's loads of ways you can reconstruct that. And as I said, I went and did aerospace engineering. I couldn't be further from aerospace engineering now, and many of my friends thank me for that every time they get in an airplane, by the way. So it's it really, I think, root and branch overhaul of secondary school in Ireland would be amazing.
Nice. Well, look, we're at the end of the podcast. It's been a pleasure spending the last 30 minutes with you, and I wish you continued success, both personally and professionally, for the future.
Rian, really appreciate it, and just share with you if you want to connect on anything else.